Here's a look at our 3-year math curriculum for grades 3 through 5. Our plan focuses on the standards addressed throughout grades 3 through 5 and how each standard builds on each other. Students will enter the 3rd grade with a foundation built on the basics of each content domain and fluency within certain aspects such as addition and subtraction. Such skills are necessary to move on to higher level skills such as multiplication and division. A quick look at our 3-year overview. Domain was chosen first because it lays the foundation needed for. Beginning with grade 3, the first quarter will start out with the number and operations in base 10 domain for the first 4 weeks. This domain was chosen first because it lays the foundation needed for the other domains. It is important to go over the basics first. The next domain in this quarter is operations and algebraic thinking. This domain will be covered in the next 5 weeks. It was chosen next because the students have learned the basics and now they must go over the use of the numbers within actual operations to solve algebra problems. This domain will be needed to be reviewed because the students will have been introduced to grouping in the 2nd grade and now they will use that same concept to learn to multiply and divide. Standard 7 of the Common Core State Standards for Mathematical Practice is used within this domain. The students must use the structure within using groups to multiply and divide when solving problems. In the 2nd quarter, operations and algebraic thinking is continued for the first 4 weeks. This domain was chosen during this time because it was started in the 1st quarter and will serve as a good base for the next domain. The next domain will be numbers and operations and fractions, and it will be the focus for the next 5 weeks. This domain was chosen next because it will be helpful if the students have a foundation of fractions before moving on to measurement. The students will use the process standard of communication within the 1st and 2nd quarter during their project. The students will use their communication skills to effectively write math problems and critique others' work. The 3rd standard for mathematical practice, which is construct viable arguments and critique reasoning of others, will be used during the same activity. In the 3rd quarter, the students will focus on measurement and data for the entire 9 weeks. This domain was chosen for this time because the students will have learned fractions in the previous quarter, and the skills learned within the unit on fractions will be helpful when going over measurement. The 1st standard for mathematical practice, which is make sense of problems and persevere in solving them, will be addressed in this domain by using manipulatives such as scales to help make sense of measurement problems. The 4th quarter will focus on measurement and data for the first 7 weeks. This domain was necessary to go over before the geometry domain, so they can use the skills learned within measurement and data and apply them to solve problems within geometry. The next domain is geometry, and it will be the focus for the remaining 2 weeks. This was chosen last because the skills gained from going over measurement will be helpful when learning geometry. The students will use the process standard of representations within a semester-long activity that requires the students to represent their cities through measurements and drawings.
Grade was 4th grade. For the standards, or for the curriculum project. And the way I kind of set it up was for quarter 1, we would do numbers and operations, which would be going into operations and algebraic thinking, or numbers and operations in base 10. But we did it like that because we felt that we switched those two around because we felt that numbers and operations in base 10 was kind of like a better leeway into algebraic thinking and operations. We thought that like it was a little bit more advanced to do, so it was just easier to transition. So I did numbers and operations in base 10 for 5 weeks because a lot of it is it's doing division, like long division and multiplication further than before. Before in 3rd grade they do like 100 and you add on to it with 1,000 multiples, like multiplying any number. So like you would do 700 divided by 70 equals 10 by applying the concepts of place value in division. So a lot of it would be just like kind of recognizing multi-digit and whole place is one digit, so it's easier for them to divide and so forth. Another thing is that they would read and write multiple digit whole numbers using base 10. So basically that we would have them understand what's greater than, less than, or equal to in certain parts. And then we decided that for algebra it would be 4 weeks because, we thought that like using that it would be a good transition from using all of those like division, subtraction, multiplication into that. And so my objectives for that was students will cite their explanation of the 4 functions and recall their knowledge of multiplication and division. So they'll take the representation from the base 10 and apply it to that. For operations and algebraic thinking, we split between 4 weeks and 3 weeks so that it's like broken up better. So for the 3 weeks, we would kind of touch base, or we would kind of go over familiarity with the fractions of the multiples and generalize and analyze the patterns of them. So we would have them create like different patterns and like understanding and knowing algebraic thinking these weeks. So they would also recall their knowledge of multiplication and division and apply it to that as well. The students will recall information on fractions and expect their knowledge by learning about fractions with the basic functions. That is also with numbers and operations and fractions. So we would have them using fractions with basic functions. In the third quarter, numbers and operations with fractions and measurement and data. So that would be 4 weeks for fractions and then 5 weeks for measurement and data. There was a lot that was covered in measurement and data, so we felt that we should apply it to that much. Or we felt that we should apply it to that part. Because it was just like there's so much on measurement that we felt that they needed a better understanding of it. So basically we're doing 10 full weeks because measurement and data is going to be over 5 weeks as well. Geometry is going to be over 4 weeks, and we decided that because geometry will show, or because with geometry, we felt that the measurement in data, we could use angles in that. We can have them measure that of certain shapes and apply it to geometry as well. So that's kind of like how we kind of go inside measurement and data and geometry. So yeah.
I'd like to give you a brief overview of the 5th grade. The school year consists of 4 quarters. The first has numbers and operations in base 10 and operations in algebraic thinking. The second quarter focuses entirely on fractions. The third quarter deals with measurement and data and geometry, while the fourth quarter concludes geometry. In numbers and operations in base 10, students will continue to build on their knowledge of whole numbers and decimals. They will learn about rounding decimal places up to the thousandth place, decimal addition and subtraction, as well as division problems involving whole numbers using 4-number dividends and 2-digit divisors. The first quarter ends with operations and algebraic thinking, where students will learn about simple numerical expressions and number patterns. Students should be able to explain what an operation means. For example, if they have 6 times 4 equals 24, they should be able to explain that 24 is 6 times as many as 4. Students will also review solving multi-step word problems involving all 4 operations. Going into the second quarter, students will work with fractions. They will build on their prior knowledge of fraction addition and subtraction. They will learn about fraction multiplication and division, adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers, and solving word problems involving fractions and the 4 operations. The students will also have to recall their knowledge about decimals from the first quarter, since they will occasionally have to write the decimal equivalent of fractions. In the third quarter, measurement and data, students will continue to learn about different measurement units and volume. They will need to review what they already know about various measurement units, their application in real life, and their equivalents. They will also learn about two-dimensional shapes and finding the perimeter and area of those shapes. They will also need to draw on their knowledge of fractions from the second quarter, since some of the measurements they will make will be made as fractions of a whole. Finally, starting at the end of the third quarter and concluding in the fourth quarter is geometry. Students will have to review two-dimensional figures in lines, angles, segments, and rays, which they will continue to learn about. They will also learn about classifying two-dimensional shapes and understanding their unique properties. During the fourth quarter, the students will also learn about the coordinate system and graphing points using the X and Y axes. We'll be working with is called the variable machine. This would fall under operations and algebraic thinking. In this activity, students will create a variable machine to discover a word's value. On a piece of notebook paper, they will write the letters of the alphabet down one side, and on the other side, they will give each letter a value starting at 0. So A would equal 0, B would equal 1, and so on and so forth. Then they can tape the ends of the strip together, or they can just keep it on the notebook paper. Then they will be asked to find the value of words, such as first names and last names. The teacher might also ask them to look for words that have certain values, such as words whose values are equal to 25, 36, or 100. Students will fill out an activity sheet as they work, and then compare their answers with a partner and participate in a class discussion afterwards about their findings.
Next is our semester activity. For our semester activity, our focus is on our third grade second semester activity, which has a focus of measurement and data as the domain. In this activity, the students will be prompted to create their own city. Throughout the semester, we will be working on measurement and work towards geometry. At the beginning of the semester, the students will make measurements of their layout of the city, including the buildings and roads. After each lesson on a new topic, the students will work that topic into their cities. So for example, as we learn about area and perimeter, the students will find the area and perimeter of the different aspects of their city. Towards the end of the semester, when students are learning geometry, they will work geometry in their cities such as angles and different shapes. Throughout the semester, the students will also be required to keep a note sheet that shows all of the work they have done and their explanations of their work. After the students complete their cities, they will be posted in the hallway so the whole school can see their work.
For fourth grade representation activity, we picked a cootie catcher activity. So in this activity, it'd be the same as working with other cootie catchers, and this is for fourth grade. Students can do this with, I chose to do this with fractions, but you can do it with like basically anything. So for the first one, I did like, they'd have to pick one of these, and it says like numerator, denominator, they'd have to count. So we'll do half, so this one, and we'll count half. So the denominator for half, 1, 2. So for this one, the student would pick like which side they would want to, which problem they would want to do, and they would write it down on a piece of paper, and they can do this with a partner, they can do it with separately. So, and you can even have the students like switch it up. Like some students can do another student's, so that would work there. So for this one, it says the value of a fraction. So how does the value of a fraction change if you double its numerator or if you double its denominator? So this shows how 1 times 2, that shows like just kind of showing the student how that's like the way they want it to be solved. So just doing the top, so 2 times 1 equals, so that's 2/3. So that's representation visually. And then the denominator, 3 times 2 equals 6, so 5, 6. So that's visual representation of that. So each one of these kind of has a different fraction. So this one's greater than or equal to 4 on a number line. So they would have to guess one of those. This one is true or false if this is the correct reduced fraction, so that's true. And then this one is adding 310 to 4 over 100, so it shows kind of like exactly the basic steps of like how 3 times 10 equals 30 in order to get the same denominator. And that equals 34 tenths over 34 over 100. I mean, sorry. Okay, and then this is kind of comparing fractions to money. So it's like if a dime is 1/10 of a dollar and a penny is 1/100th of a dollar, what fraction of a dollar is 6 dimes and 3 pennies? Right answer in fraction and decimal. And they should show visual representation as well. So this is kind of how you would show the visual representation of that, and then their full explanation of it. So, and then for this one, it's, right, that one. And then that's basically all. And we were kind of talking about we talked about how it justifies, like you use it for different levels, and in order to do this activity, you need to have basic understandings of fractions in order to even like select the top ones. So, and it kind of bridges the way for the students to kind of do more, as in like more multiplying and kind of go into even other topics. So, it works really nicely for that.